Hello, my name is Melissa. I'm currently working with Nawasak and Daswantag as a support worker during this COVID-19 time. I just want to say welcome to my home, welcome to my kitchen. This evening through video, what I'm going to be doing is sharing my recipe of scone dogs. I come from northeastern Alberta. I learned how to make bannock with my cookum, my grandmother, when I was a very young girl. And when I came here to Ontario, an interesting story is when I came to Ontario, I never knew what scone meant. I was actually taught from my grandmother the word bannock, and we did a lot of making the bannock and frying it in our oven, which at the time wasn't electrical or gas. It was the old wood stoves. She taught us from a young age how to make her bannock. There was no recipe written or anything like that. It was just all by sight. And when I came to Ontario and I heard about scone dogs, or scone, I never even knew what scone was. I soon learned quickly that scone is fry bread, which we call scone. We call it fry bread out in northeastern Alberta. And then bannock is the version for bannock and cooking in the oven. So again, welcome. I hope you enjoy when you try this recipe out. Quick movement here with the camera. Anyways, like I said, welcome to my kitchen, and I'm going to be sharing with you the recipe. Like I said, I learned from my cookum how to make scone dogs. Anyways, as you can see here, the ingredients you'll need: flour. This is just simple all-purpose unbleached flour. I prefer unbleached over the bleached flour. It's President's choice. Doesn't have to cost a lot of money. If you're looking for a healthier version of the recipe because of health concerns or anything like that, or just a healthy choice of lifestyle, you can use whole wheat or different kind of flours. But I have right now unbleached all-purpose flour, white sugar. Again, maybe you can use some honey or real maple syrup, milk. I got sunflower oil, which is healthier than canola oil, or vegetable oil is good. I like chicken wieners over beef wieners or pork wieners. I really like chicken wieners, and they're actually more affordable. You're going to need some baking powder, which I have here. Some hot water. Some salt, your measuring cups, your measuring spoons, a fork to stir with, and of course a frying pan. I really like cast iron frying pans. Anyways, the one thing that is different than when I learned as a child from my cookum was she didn't use these kind of oils. She actually used lard. She always cooked with lard, and from my understanding, lard was quite healthy. She also didn't use sugar. What she would use was maple syrup, water. She never used milk. Some people nowadays, what I've noticed is they've gotten really great with making the bannock dough, the scone dough, the fried bread dough, and they will use milk. They'll use buttermilk. They'll also add an egg. They say it helps to make it fluffier. So whatever works, whatever you want to try, it's up to you. But for myself, I pretty much try to keep it as simple as possible. Like I said, I didn't learn through a written recipe with my cooking. I just learned by watching her and doing the work with her. I think it's great to actually have your children involved with doing this, especially the younger ones. It's a great sensory activity to have with them. With my daughters, I used to give them a small bowl and let them mix it up with their hands and get the senses going, and it's great for math, anything cooking. Cooking is art, it is science, it's math, it's chemistry. I always say to everyone, love your food and your food will love you back. So we're going to get started. And what I'm going to do is actually try to measure this out for everyone. So I don't have a big household here, so depending on your household size, that's going to make a difference in how much you're going to use. So what I'm going to start with right now is I'm going to actually start with I'm going to say there's 1 cup. I'm going to start with 2 cups of flour. I don't want to make too much scone dogs and let them go bad. There's, like I said, I don't have a large household, so I don't need a lot. So I'm going to use 2 cups of flour. Then what I'm going to do is open up the baking powder. And I'm actually going to use tablespoons. So I'm going to take 1 tablespoon. I'm going to take another tablespoon. They call it magic baking powder, or they used to anyways, baking powder. It's great. It makes your pastries, your doughs, those that you want to rise. That's what activates the flour in it to rise. I knew a woman who actually used also yeast in her bannock, which was quite different than what I'm used to. So I'm going to use the 2 tablespoons of baking powder. What I'm going to take next is, I'm not going to take a lot of sugar. I'm just going to take a 1/4 teaspoon of sugar. I'm going to actually move this to the side. Bear with me. I don't have a big space. I'm going to take a 1/4 teaspoon of sugar, and I'm going to just sprinkle it in there. Then I'm going to actually take the salt. And I'm going to use, let's say, I wouldn't know what that is. Let me look for another measuring spoon. I think I would prefer to use an 1/8 teaspoon of salt. I guess if you want to use a little bit more, you can, but I'm going to just take an 1/8 of salt. And I'm going to sprinkle that in there. Maybe another 1/8. Rachel Ray, I'm not. Again, I didn't learn by measuring. Everything I'm doing, I learned pretty much by sight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my fork, and I'm just going to blend. If you want to come closer, my videographer here, you can put it right over the flour if you can. I'm just going to blend it. So I'm blending all the dry ingredients together. Make sure it's well blended in there. Then I don't actually put the oil in the flour. My cookum used to take the lard, melt it, and pour it in there. The oil for me is to fry the bread in. For myself, I don't use any oil in it. That's optional. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take some milk. I kind of like, my cookum taught me to kind of make a little funnel in with the flour. And I'm going to pour, oh, I should try to use this by eyesight, right? I'm using it by eyesight, that's what I'm used to, but I'm going to try with a measuring cup. I'm going to take a 1/2 cup of milk, and I'm going to pour that in there. Then I'm actually going to take some hot water. I like using the hot water, not boiling hot water, but your tap hot water, because I find it kind of activates the baking powder. And I got 2 cups here. I'm just going to pour until I see the top, so that looks like 1 cup. What I'm also going to do here is, before I move on to anything else, I'm going to actually flour my hands. And I'm going to flour my table as well, because using the dough, I like to mix it with my hands after I use the fork. Then I need to also flour the table. It helps to keep the dough from sticking to the table too much. So as you can see, this is what I do. This is what my cookum taught me, is to take some of the flour and put it down. And then I'm going to flour my hands as well to keep them somewhat dry, because I'm using, again, mixing the dough and working with the dough, it can stick to the fingers quite easily. So now what I'm going to do is I got everything together. I didn't add no eggs, no buttermilk, and all of this stuff. I'm keeping it pretty simple. I'm just going to take my fork and I'm going to mix it. And this is where I also come in by eye, like my grandmother, my cookum taught me, to see the consistency of the dough as I'm mixing it. We don't want the dough too dry, and we don't want it too gooey. If you find, or wet, if you find that the dough, the texture, the consistency of the dough is that it's too dry, then you can always add more water. If you find that it's too moist or too wet, you can add more flour. That's the great thing. So as you can see, I'm taking the dough, and that's why I said, because it is sticky. If you look at the consistency of what I got, the consistency of the dough, it's a bit sticky, which is okay. So I'm going to take my dough after mixing it in the bowl here. So as you can see, I'm now done with the bowl, which is great. And I'm going to lay it on top of this flour part of my table. And I'm going to actually just kind of like knead it a little bit. The bannock doesn't need, the bannock dough or the scone dough, fried bread dough, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't need to be kneaded a lot. Not like maybe when you're using, like making regular bread, that might need to be kneaded a little bit more. With bannock, you don't. So you see this is my texture of my bannock. And then what my cookum taught me. Now if I were to just put this in the oven, my videographer here is my lovely roommate, and she wanted to learn how to make bannock. She wanted bannock for her birthday, and I was like, oh, bannock's so messy to make, and it's been so hot, and using the stove, you know. But she taught me just to take my fingers and kind of just move it around like that. So if I were to just take this dough and make bannock out of it, just plain, simple, old, like plain bannock, this is what I would do. This is how my cooking taught me. And then I would just take a fork, and she taught me to poke holes in there. I guess it's the air in there that's needed. You want your bannock fluffy. You want the outside crusty, like a golden color, and then you want the inside to be soft, fluffy, and airy. So I would just put this on a baking sheet pan, or some people put it in a cast iron frying pan, and they would just stick it in the oven. I would say stick it in at your regular 350. First you might want to put a little bit of butter on there, or some oil. I put a little bit of flour as well. That's how I line the pan. You could put it in there, put it in the oven, and just let it rise. And when you see that it's getting to that time when it's starting to crust over, you can always flip your bannock over. Sometimes I do, to get the golden color on the top part as well. Some people don't. So I'm pretty much done with making it. The other thing what you could do with bannock, you can put blueberries in here as you're mixing it, strawberries. You could put also raisins are delicious in it. Maybe you even want to add some sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, whatever you want. You can always add that when you're doing the dough. For myself, I'm not baking this. I'm not making just bannock. I'm actually making scone dogs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this dough, this bread, bannock's bread basically. Interesting thing is, like, bannock, scone, it's not actually an original food to our indigenous communities. It was part of a recipe that came in during the time of the fur trade, from my understanding. and what I've learned the fur trade, as part of the fur trade time, the flour and everything like that. Flour, white flour is not a part of our original foods. For indigenous people, we lived off the land wherever we were. That's what we did. So the thing with this as well is if you're going to make fried bread or scone, just plain fried bread or scone, what I do is I take a glass or a cup or something and I line it with flour and I poke in there discs, and I make a little slit, put it in the frying pan with the oil and let it float there, cook it, flip it over, and I just keep rolling the dough out until it's all done, which is going to be similar to what we're doing for our scone dogs. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to take one of my knives and I'm going to actually start to cut the dough. So I'm just going to cut the dough into sections here. So there's the inside of the dough. You could also do it this way if you're going to just make simple fried bread scone. You could cut them in sections instead of making them into discs. It's up to you, whatever you choose. So, as you can see, it's pretty much like this. What I'm going to do is I get this pan ready, and I'm going to put oil in this pan and get it ready. So we need to, if I can get it open, there we go. We need to pour the oil in the pan. And you need enough of this oil when you're frying your dough. You need enough of it for the scone or the bannock, whatever you want to call it, and the scone dogs, to half of it, float half of it in there, and then you're going to turn it over as it's cooking. So, excuse me, and I'm going to take this over and move it to my frying pan. Sorry, I don't have a very big kitchen. We're also going to be making some Indian tacos tonight. I'm going to turn on my fan, so hopefully you hear me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my stove on right now to high. I'm going to let this oil heat up. I'm going to take a little bit of water, whatever, and flick it in there to see if it's bubbling and the reaction, to make sure that it's heated enough. If you put anything in a frying pan, especially doughy stuff, and it's not ready, whether it's potatoes even, things with starches, if the oil is not hot enough, it will actually make things stick to the pan even more. So you want it to be hot enough that when you submerge that food in there, it's not going to stick to the pan. This is going to kind of look like it's flowing. So I'm going to come back here. Actually, let me grab some paper towel, because what I like to do is I also like to dry a bit of that liquid off of the wieners. If you open wieners, you'll always notice that there's always a little bit of that fluid from the meat. So if you can see that, like if you go like this, you'll see that there's some moisture there. I like to take this so it can have a better time sticking at the dough like this, but not making that dough too wet. So let me start out with 4. I don't think I'm really going to need much more than that. I think 1 should fill up my roommate. I find them very filling foods. So again, I'm going to kind of stretch out this dough, as you can see. And I'm going to just take the wiener, and I'm going to take the wiener, and I'm going to literally, just like a pogo, more affordable than a pogo, and probably healthier than a pogo, not so many preservatives. I'm going to take that wiener, and I'm going to just do this. There we go. Pinch that, close it up, and there it is. So when that pan of oil starts to get warmer, then doesn't have to be perfect. I don't think it, as long as it tastes delicious, I don't think people really care. Scone dogs look perfect. What's interesting is you could always take a popsicle stick when this is all cooked and stick it in there, and guess what? It becomes like the pogo sticks that you may buy at the store for your children as their snacks or whatever. I can hear that oil starting to already bubble, which is great. You got to be careful too in working with this oil, because when it's hot, it's going to spit like most other oils. But as you can see, if you want to bring it over and look it right over, you can see the bubbling happening. Okay, so I'm going to take it and I'm going to turn it down a bit because I don't want it to stay too hot. I don't want the oil to burn, or so I'm just going to take my Scone Dog and I'm going to gently put it in there. There you go. My cat is trying to eat the wieners on my table. Hazel, no, honey. So let's put the 3 in there first. So we got to keep an eye on that while we're still rolling the other Scone Dogs. You don't want them to burn. They cook pretty fast. We should see the dough rising in the pan if I've put enough baking powder, which I hope I did. Like I said, I don't measure things. I just was taught by eye, and that's pretty much how I was taught. So there we go. And some of you probably may already know your recipes for your Scone Dogs. If you do, and it's different than mine, and you want to share it, please share it to the Facebook site with Nawasa. That would be great. So I'm going to take some tongs, and I'm just going to actually start looking, and it's already starting to brown, get golden brown, which is great, as you can see. So I'm going to turn them over, and I'm going to just let them cook. And then you can continue adding to your frying pan, gently putting it in there. More of these Scone Dogs, which is great. There. This should actually be enough for my household. Again, it doesn't take too long, and as you can see, the dough is already starting to rise as it's frying in the pan here, which is great, which is wonderful. I don't find it difficult or takes too much time to prepare or make these kind of foods. I mean, you can take this Scone Dogs and you can add it for dinner or for lunch with a salad, a nice salad, some fresh fruit, whatever you enjoy, your family, your children enjoy eating. I, honest to goodness, say I myself as a grown woman only need 1 Scone Dog, and then you can put some ketchup, mayonnaise, mustard, relish to the side, whatever you want that you enjoy. Make it fun and interesting for the kids. You can go ahead and you can add a popsicle stick to the end so they can carry it around. Whatever you want to do with it, you're welcome to do that. So you turn it on a little higher. So 1 package of wieners, I think, can go quite far. They're filling. They're very filling food. They're fun food. They're inexpensive, depending on how you make your dough, what kind of meat you use. Maybe you want to use a sausage instead, an Italian, spicy Italian sausage, or If you do have any deer sausages or moose sausages, maybe you want to try that out in there. I never have, but there's no harm in being adventurous with the foods, even our foods that have been around for a very long time. So this is as it's starting. So as it's cooking, what I would do is I'm going to take a plate. I want to put it over here for a minute. And I'm just going to take some napkins, paper towel, whatever works, because I would like it to suck up that grease when I pull it out of the pan. Kind of like bacon, you know, like it will have some grease on it because of course it's being cooked in oil. As you can see, it's looking good. Smells good. And what I'm going to do with the remainder of that dough is I'm actually going to just fry it as fried dough, scone, right in, plain and simple in the pan here. And when we make up our hamburger for tacos, I'm going to have those available instead of taco shells. We'll have taco shells as well, but you know, for my friend here and my family who's here, if they choose to have Indian taco instead of a Mexican taco, they can put their ingredients on fried bread instead of the taco shell from the taco kit. So there we go. Nice golden brown cooked scone dog. Yum. Anyways, thank you for joining me. Have yourself a good evening, good day, good morning. Try this out. Share your recipes with us. That would be cool. Welcome back. My roommate here, my friend here, wants to video me actually just making simple fried bread with the leftover rabbinic or dough that we made for the scone dog. So, like I said before, I'm just gonna poke some holes in here, get them all ready. Whether you want to make discs, heart shapes, whatever you would like, whatever shape you want to make that dough in, you're welcome to do that. So usually for Indian tacos though, they use bigger pieces. I'll make a couple small pieces, and then I'm going to make some big pieces here, and then actually just roll it again. Again, you should try to have your young ones joining you with doing this. It's a great sensory, it's a great learning experience for them. It's a fun family activity to do. I would just recommend, you're the one who cooks the dough at the oil when it comes to cooking, because of how hot the oil can get and the splattering. For safety purposes, that's what I would do. So as you can see, I got 2 small ones, 2 medium ones, and I'm going to just make a little bit more here with the rest of the dough. I do what my cookum taught me, which again is, flatten it out a little bit there, poke some holes in it. I think I have some chemistry to kind of do with it, helping to make it fluffy on the inside. So there you go. I'm going to do this. It doesn't have to be perfect. All that matters is that it tastes good. So I'm going to take the 2 pieces, going to come back to my stove. Very hot pan I have on here. Slide it back on. Still hot. Still bubbling. Very carefully, and maybe with some tongs, I'm going to take this dough. As you can see, when I put it in, it doesn't stick. It's bubbling. I'm going to actually just put some like this on top here as well. Take the other one. I'm going to put it in there. Now, depending on how much fried bread, scone dogs you're making, when you look at your oil at the bottom, you might start to see it starts to get some of that flour sinking at the bottom. If that gets too much and too thick, you need to put a new batch of oil in there. So what I usually do is, it's not good to throw oil down your sink because it's going to plug it. I usually take an old can and carefully, once I would, once it's cooled off, I dump the oil in there. So maybe you want another pan ready if this happens, depending on how much you're going. If you have a fryer at home, actually, potato fryer with the thing you dip in, you could also use that. That would be, I've never had that myself, but it just came to my mind. That would be a good way to cook this as well. And as you can see, it's already starting to rise. That is wonderful about the baking powder. It used to be called magic baking powder when I was a kid. I don't know if it still is, but there we go. I'm going to flip it over because it will burn easily. I don't want it to burn. I want it to be a golden crust on the outside and fluffy and soft on the inside. So I'm going to take another plate here as she's watching that for me. And I'm actually just going to use this. If you hold on, you can hear me shuffling back here. I'm so sorry. I'm going to take this. And again, I like to add some paper towel because of the oil, the grease, to absorb some of the grease off of there. So there we go. And then here is my scone all completed. Take a stick if you want, poke it in there at the end for your kids. It's great. So, ooh, yummy, yummy, yummy. Yummy, yummy, yummy. One time I made these and I served them at a feast, and I guess I didn't make the recipe right. And they said it tasted like discs. They were hard. Hopefully that doesn't happen to you, you know. We live and learn. I hadn't made fried bread in, oh my God, ages. I was so much used to making the bannock in the oven, and like we never had gas stoves or electric stoves as kids when I lived with my cookum and my mushum. In the bush there, or in town, we had wooden stove and a wooden oven. So, you know, they were always chopping wood, my mushum and uncles and dad, and bringing them, and they were hunting and fishing and snaring, and we collected water and did the cooking and the laundry and all that stuff. I never had toys as a kid, but I learned all these wonderful skills from them on how to make certain foods. I even learned how to skin and gut a fish, the whole 9 yards. We'd go pick our berries and we'd go to town for some staple food like flour. We never had milk. We used carnation milk and powdered milk, Tang orange juice. That's how we had it. So this is it. This is cooking this way. So my roommate also wanted to learn how to make this, so I hope she's now learned and she doesn't forget and she can make it on her own.
I'm going to be the tester.
Trial and error she can do. You know, the first time she might not turn out right. She might have to do it again and keep trying until she gets that recipe just right. I will actually, I think I already sent out a bannock recipe. I don't know if it's been posted to their Facebook site. Look how big this one rised. Beautiful. You know what's wonderful about this bannock too is when you're camping and you make it, you can always wrap that around the stick and cook it over the open fire as well and pull it off. Warm bannock, warm scone, whatever you want to call it. Cut that open. You either put butter on it or peanut butter and jam, whatever it is. It's so delicious when it's warm with that stuff on there. It's a comfort food. Can't always say cooking it the way I did with this particular recipe. Not everybody would say yes if you're diabetic or whatever, you know, but you can use alternatives. Instead of using sugar, you can use maple syrup, preferably real maple syrup. You can use raw sugar. Oh, hot. I'm going to turn my fan up. So I hope you can hear me with my fan on, and then I got to clean everything up. Clean up all the dough, scrape it off while everybody else is eating what I cooked. But Mama P, see you around. There you go.